So can Hellraid still become a game in itself? Or will it break Dying Light in the process of trying? I'll get to the second part of that question in a moment. The launch of a Hellraid DLC for Dying Light pretty much ended any hopes of a standalone Hellraid game. And although Techland did add some extra content and some bounties a few months after release with the Lord Hectors Demise update, it wasn't really much of an expansion, and it was only another reason to just briefly go back to it. Now, it's always amazed me how Techland continue to support Dying Light, but you do have to wonder how much longer that support will last once Dying Light 2 is released. So I'd assumed that Hellraid was essentially dead now, as there'd been no mention of it in the last 9 months, and their focus has definitely shifted more towards the sequel in recent weeks. But then they dropped this totally unexpected launch trailer for the Prisoner update, and they've added a brand new story mode that amazingly is the first of a series of updates that's going to add more chapters to actually flesh out the lore of Baal's Tower. But of course no expansion would be complete without some extra goodies, and there's 2 new weapons to get your hands on, a new enemy type, and they've added stamina potions to help out with those endless waves of enemies. And on top of that, there are tons of changes to the way the game looks and plays. So in this video, I'll be taking a look at everything and seeing if this new update will transform Hellraid into the game that we never got. But first, a hint of what I meant about Hellraid possibly breaking Dying Light. When you go to load a save now, you get this warning that it was created using a previous version of the game. It says that if you continue, it will be converted to the current format, but then previous versions won't be able to load it. Now, I've never seen this before after any DLC updates, so does this mean that they fundamentally changed the main game too? It's certainly a little worrying, and it had me feeling unsure about selecting yes when asked if I want to continue, especially using my main save that I've built up over a long time. But ultimately, I decided that Techland must know what they're doing and selected yes anyway with my fingers crossed. I'll be taking a look at whether the main game has been affected by this in any way at the end of the video, and I've left timestamps in the description below for anybody who wants to jump to points of interest like this one now. Anyway, once you've loaded into Hellraid, it's immediately obvious that they've made some big changes. Firstly, the lighting is a big improvement. Previously, the colouring was very bright and kind of cartoonish, but now it looks so much more realistic and atmospheric. They've also added more detail in the mini-map, with contours of the room now clearly visible. I mean, before you could only see where the enemies were in relation to you, and that was pretty much it. The chest where you had to collect your weapons from has been removed also, and now there's just a lootable chest with 1 basic weapon, and there's also a weapon with this skeleton, so you do have to start out with very little, it seems. And that has basically patched the duplication glitch that you could use before each run. But it isn't so necessary now, as you do get to keep your inventory after each playthrough, when before it just reset to nothing every time. Also, the bounty table that was added with the Lord Hectors Demise update has been removed, so this chamber is little more than a gateway to the first level of the Hellraid story mode now. But there was one more surprise before taking the plunge. Up until now, when you pulled the lever to open the trapdoor, it just cranked over by itself. But now they've added an animation where Crane actually grabs hold of the handle with both hands and makes it look like quite an effort to pull. And that's a really surprising detail, and hopefully it will lead to more realism within the game now. The first thing I noticed upon entering Hellraid was that the bar at the top of the screen with your 3 lives has been removed as well. It appears that now you can die as many times as needed to complete the game, and you'll always respawn right back where you died. Now that's going to make the game much more accessible to anyone who's playing with a lower survivor rank. I mean, I couldn't complete it even with max levels without losing all 3 lives and going back to the start several times, so this is a very welcome change in my opinion. So the next major difference you notice is when you approach the door to the first level and you hear the voice of Lucias. This will happen periodically as you progress through the game now, and it's a nice addition to the storytelling in Hellraid. Before, the only kind of world building was done using the mysterious scrolls, they were just basically collectible notes found around the map that told the story of Baal's Tower. They were interesting enough, but did little really to bring the story to life, so having an actual voice guiding you as you progress is cool, and it made me wonder if Lucius might turn out to be an actual animated character. Once you get through that first door, it becomes clear that the layout has changed too. I mean, it is the same level, but the path to the next door is altered slightly. You used to be able to just turn left out the door, go straight to the next one, but obviously going through a few zombies in the process. But now you have to go out onto the balcony and walk across these planks to get to the other side of the bars. The enemies here are pretty weak still, so it doesn't matter too much yet that your weapons are crap, and Hellraid weapons do seem much more effective in here than they are in Dying Light, so you can still chop them up pretty easily even with the basic weapons. For some reason, the glowing keystone has been moved from the left to the right of the locked door now, and I'm not sure what the point of that change was, but I guess there must have been a reason. Once you get through the door and have killed all of the enemies, you can now find the first of the 3 secret rooms. The first one is accessed through the gap above this room by climbing up the barred wall and then turning and jumping onto the beam. Then you can jump over to the little loft space and crawl through the hole and into the secret room. After looting the room, you just pull the lever to get back out again. The next one is at the back of the raised area to the left of the main hall, and there's a bookshelf which did have more books on it before, but now the single book left on the bottom shelf is the one that will release the secret door. The third one is back in the main hall, and it's in the loft space above the back room. You just have to climb the pillar and make your way across to it. The first skeletons in the game have been tweaked to actually run at you now, which took me by surprise a little at first, and it's tricky to kill the bigger guys with swords as they counter your attacks a bit too accurately. But you get there eventually, and then the door to the next room opens. Either the door on the left or the right could open alternately on each playthrough before, but I'm not sure if that's the case in story mode, as there was a glowing symbol on the door, but it doesn't seem to be there now. There was also a cheese finding quest in each of these rooms to unlock the next secret, but after killing all of the enemies and then checking the cheese plate, it was clear that the instructions had gone and the hidden cheese blocks are missing too, so that's a bit strange, but I did find out after finishing the story mode that the cheese blocks are back in their hiding places when you play on raid mode, so thankfully this feature hasn't been removed entirely. The next major addition with this update is that of a new enemy. You first encounter him in this room, and he's basically just a big skeleton carrying a shield, which he actually bangs with his weapon as if to challenge you. That weapon is the new 2-handed Bonecruncher, which, interestingly, he's only using with one hand, as I suppose he does have his shield in the other. And that makes me wonder if we can use a shield whilst using the Bonecruncher. The Shockbearer shield was added in the last update and unlocked by ranking up, and it really helped when dealing with sword attacks, but unfortunately you don't have access to one at the start of story mode, and at this point haven't found one hidden in the game. This puts us at a real disadvantage, as these guys are not easy to kill and they deflect your attacks with total precision. You just have to let them lunge at you so as to leave them open to attack, but having the Shockbearer would have evened things up, and even when you've killed him, you can't take his shield as it just disappears. What you can take, though, is his Bonecruncher. You don't actually unlock this weapon until you've ranked up to Vanquisher level, so this is just a low damage version, but it still looks really cool with the glowing symbols along the shaft and on the head. It's kind of a medieval sledgehammer, to be honest, and I'm not normally a fan of 2-handed weapons, but weapons that glow in the dark are much more interesting. Of course, once you have ranked up and unlocked the Bonecruncher, then a gold version of it becomes available in the Hellraid shop. This can be found in the form of a chest next to the arcade machine in the tower, and weapons here can be purchased using the Hellraid coins that you've collected in the game. Another tip for gaining coins in the game is to break down the weaker weapons instead of dropping them. It's always worth picking up the crap weapons just for this purpose. You can see that the gold Bonecruncher is already fairly strong, but after adding 3 decent mods, it is now an over 4,000 damage weapon, and it works pretty well in the main game too. I've found in the past that Hellraid weapons don't perform as well out here, but this one has no problem splitting skulls, and now you can use charged attacks with it too, which for some reason isn't possible in Hellraid. When you finally get to the arena, it's all pretty straightforward when playing on normal, and I'd say that it actually feels a little less challenging than before, but I'm sure it would be harder on raid mode. You simply take on a new wave of enemies as each door opens, and throwing explosives over the fast recruits does slow down the dangerous glowing skeletons at the back, whilst you can deal with the runners at the front. In the light of the arena, you really can see the graphical improvements in the enemies, especially the Torturer's outfit. His hood used to look, bright purple and a little bit cartoony again, but now they've made it look much more like leather, and I have seen one with a black leather hood in here as well, so that's some really nice attention to detail. The next wave of enemies only starts when all of the previous wave has been killed, so it's always a good idea to leave one alive until you've picked up all of the dropped loot. You will have to keep avoiding it though, as it won't leave you to farm in peace, unless you have one that bugs out, that is. The same kind of rule applies to the Minotaur. If you kill every enemy before killing him, then they will constantly respawn. So again, leave one alive, and then you can deal with him more easily. I'd recommend saving your rusty shivs for this part, as it makes destroying the Minotaur really simple. You can damage him from a distance without risking being stomped, and climbing onto these wooden supports will make it impossible for him to reach you, and after he falls you just have to kill the last guard to open the gate to the vault. This would have been where the game ended before the update, and after looting the vault you just went back to the Hellraid lobby, where you could either try it again, or as I'm sure was the case with many players, only come back when there's something new to see. And of course now there is something new to see, and when you start looting you'll hear Lucias cast a spell to open a portal. When you walk through the portal it transports you to a brand new area, which is really the start of quite a big expansion to Hellraid. The task now is to find Lucias, and this will obviously mean facing more waves of enemies, but also trying to work out how to unlock the doors to each room. I like how there's a bit of a puzzle element to the progression now, and not just killing a ton of enemies. To escape this first room, you need to walk to the end of this beam, jump onto the pillar, and then turn around and leap onto that plank. Then you can pull yourself up above the room and make your way across the beams to where you'll find this wall torch. Interact with it, and a secret door opens below to reveal some loot and a lever to unlock the exit to the room. All you have to do now is empty this room of enemies and unlock the gate to finally reveal the guy who the voice belongs to. To be honest, I was a little disappointed to discover that he's not a fully realised character at all, and he's little more than a poorly rendered statue really. I was expecting more from Lucias, and surely they could have overlaid him onto any character model from Dying Light to make him interact with you directly. It just feels unfinished this way. Anyway, he tells you to free him from his binds, which involves climbing through to the source of each red energy wave to destroy the binding crystal. It is protected by enemies that will just keep on coming until you've smashed it. When that is done and you found your way back to Lucias, he casts a spell to open the left passage, and you just repeat the process again, albeit in a different set of rooms. I found that the rusty shivs were also a good way to damage the crystal without having to fight the enemies. Now, when you return to Lucias, he disappears and a portal opens up that takes you to his study. He then goes on to tell you who he is, and you get a series of welcome messages pointing out that this will now be the Hellraid lobby, where you'll find the chest for the weapons and the bounty table that was missing from the start. Now you can access the new raid mode, and that's basically the 3 lives challenge that Hellraid was before, although it has been tweaked to be more difficult now. Now you may have thought that this was all the update had to offer at this point, but don't forget that there's still a special bow to find. After physically looking around at the points of interest in the study, including finding the old lobby outside, a new quest appears called Beneath the Seals. It simply says that you need to uncover the temple's secrets, and a portal then opens up that will take you to the first level. Lucias explains that you'll start in a place that you already know, but not as you remember it, and after dealing with the enemies, it wasn't long before I found this chamber with what was obviously one of the secrets. This one was reached by swimming through a hole beneath the caged area, and when I approached it, the secret told me that it was the 3rd coffer. So I guess that meant there was probably going to be 3 coffers to find in this quest. It may look pretty straightforward in this video, but in actual fact there are a ton of enemies standing between you and these secrets. I've just edited the footage down so that you can see where the coffers are and how to get them. The next area I recognised as one of the cheese rooms near the start of the game, and after clearing the room and finding roughly where the secret was according to the minimap, I realised that there was a false wall where a recess used to be. And just as I was working out how to open it, an enemy appearing out from behind these barrels led me to look behind them, and that's where the lever for the false wall was hidden. So that's 2 coffers now, and after yet another wave of enemies, you can exit the room out into where we encountered the first skeletons in the story earlier. But you can see that there's now an altar in the middle of the room and a massive hole to the left preventing us from leaving the way we came in. But the door to what used to be the alternate cheese room is open now, and if you make your way to the back of the chamber, up onto the first landing, you'll find the last coffer behind the bars. I'll admit now that this one stumped me for a short time. You can see a doorway to the left in the caged area, and I looked all around for a way in. But had I paid attention to the minimap, I would have noticed that there was a passage behind the wall to the left of me, and once I'd realised this, I had discovered an interactive wall behind me that unlocked it. So now we have all 3 coffers. Fight your way out of the room and back to the altar where the coffers can now be placed. They lower down into it, and then the second bonus weapon appears labelled the Corrupted Justice. It's quite a nice bow, and it looks like it'd easily double for a sword, with the blades on the end, and picking it up gives a closer look at the purple glowing details on the back of it. No sooner have you started to admire it than you get a chance to try it out, because of course some more enemies appear. It seems to one-shot everything, but skeletons only die from a direct headshot from a charged pull on the string. Now this weapon will not be available to buy in the Hellraid shop, but amazingly you do get a gold blueprint for it. So now we can craft this very powerful bow in the main game, and I won't be so gutted if I accidentally drop it and then die, because that actually happened to my Dragon's Breath bow, sadly. It performs pretty well outside of Hellraid, but as always, the most fun arrows are the explosive ones, and when used at night, you can see that it really does glow quite nicely in the dark too. Back in Hellraid, and when you return to Lucius, he tells you he must gather his strength and for you to await his sign. So I'm guessing that means we'll just have to wait for another content drop for part 2 of the story, as Techland have amazingly revealed that they intend to gradually unveil the plot with each new episode. So the last thing to try is the new raid mode. Don't worry though, I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing, as I just want to see if there's any difference from the start. The red portal is now the only option from the lobby, as walking into the blue portal has no effect, but I'm assuming that this will be how we get to the next chapter as and when it drops. After entering raid mode, you can see the old familiar 3 lives are back, confirming that this is essentially what used to be Hellraid before the prisoner update. You start in the same room by the statue, but you don't have to swim anymore to get to the first door, and as soon as you get to the first level, you realise that the slow-moving zombies that used to be in this part of the game have been replaced by recruits and some running skeleton warriors, so I think it's fair to assume that raid mode isn't going to be quite like the Hellraid from before after all. Okay, so remember that ominous warning at the beginning before loading up. Was I right to be worried about it? Well, after unlocking raid mode, I was able to go back to my main save without any issues using the back to the slums option in the menu. And the good news is that your inventory doesn't empty into your stash after playing Hellraid now. But I'd also started a second Hellraid story mode using a different save, and my story progress in this one was where I just arrived in the old town, and the quest was to find the embers. Loading that save now drops me back into Hellraid, as that was the tracked quest, but normally you can just change the tracked quest back to the embers, and then when you quit out and select continue, you just restart at Old Town. However, that was not the case this time, and despite clearly showing Find the Embers as the tracked quest, I was dropped straight back into Hellraid again. That should not happen, and it has left me with a pretty frustrating problem. The only option in the menu is to quit to the slums and not to the Old Town. And the option to return to the Hellraid lobby isn't there either, so I can't even use the poster to get back. So my one option that I seemed to have left was to quit to the slums, and this seemed to really break things now. The load screen was showing the Embers quest and playing Crane's dialogue on the subject, despite taking me back to Brecken's tower. But at least I could use the poster in the tower now, right? Well, it turns out that because I'd quit the game straight after getting to Old Town and before I'd contacted the Embers, unfortunately the poster to fast travel back to Old Town hasn't spawned by the shop in the tower yet. So this has effectively broken my save until I complete story mode again with this one, and even then I'm not sure that would work. Now I realise that this is quite a unique problem that I have, but I have seen many other people complaining that the prisoner update has caused them issues too. Some have experienced game crashes when opening their inventory after returning to the main game, but the most common problem is that their saves keep loading them back into Hellraid despite having tracked a quest in the main game, as happened to me. And again, unless you've finished the story mode and unlocked Lucias Study, the only option is to go back to the slums each time you load your save, and if your last quest was in the Old Town, then you'd have to go back to the tower, then fast travel by poster, which is a real pain, and it needs to be fixed. So in answer to the question of whether Hellraid can still become a game in itself, I'd have to say yes. If Techland continue to add more chapters in the coming months, then it certainly looks like a more fully realised Hellraid game is developing with each new playable level. I just hope that they can bring Lucius and other potential new characters to life a bit more, as I'm sure it's entirely possible. If you already enjoyed Hellraid, then this is a welcome development, and if you weren't sold on the idea of Hellraid before, then surely this makes it worth a look now. And on to the question of whether Hellraid will potentially break Dying Light in this process, the answer could well be another yes. Of course, I hope that Techland can get to the bottom of these issues, but as I said earlier, the fact that you had to accept a change to your main save in order to play Hellraid, and one that can't be undone afterwards, is very worrying. I wouldn't want to have to uninstall Hellraid as some others already have, but it might be the only sensible option until Techland fix this. And of course, with so much going on at the moment at Techland, I'm not sure it will get the attention it needs at the moment either. Okay, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you've come across any issues since the update, and if you watched until the end, then I thank you, and please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.